And I have this thing I wanted to put up. This is not the topic of my talk, but these are words that I like to live by, and they support what I'm going to talk about tonight. And so I thought it would add a dimension to what I'm going to say if I can point out to these without interrupting what I'm saying when these are at work. See how much time I have. Okay. So I'm going to talk tonight about judgment and alternatives. And I want first to say that I did not choose this topic for this group because I see a lot of judgmentalism in the vegan community. I do not. So I'm not talking about anybody here or anyone I know. What I hear is that people don't want to judge. They hear don't judge, but they don't know what to do in place of that. And so they are silent. And particularly where this comes up with me is when it's in a vegan, they want to talk about veganism, but they're told not to judge, and so they don't know what to do. They feel silenced, and I don't want people to feel that way because we don't have to do that. So I became interested in this about 5 years ago. I decided I was becoming interested in Buddhism, and I decided that I wanted to pay attention to. I wanted to become aware of the judgmental thoughts that I was having because I wasn't sure that they were wise. So I started just paying attention to them for a week, and I would just hear it, just a little bell would go off in my head when there was a judgmental thought. And I noticed a couple of things about it. This is what happens when we just pay attention to something. I noticed that they were not useful. I didn't say them out loud very much. When somebody cut me off in traffic, oh, you big jerk. That wasn't useful, and even if I said this to this person, that's not going to be useful, not going to help anything. And I did not like that it made me feel kind of mean. I didn't like that. That's not how I wanted to be. So I realized, now I have something behind that don't judge that we hear all our lives. I still didn't know what to do, but I had a reason why I could see why it was somewhat of a problem. But me being me, the way my brain works is I can't just see something and understand it. Maybe the rest of you can just see something that seems obvious right away. I have to pick it apart into little particles. So I felt like I needed to break this down into little tiny parts. And what I decided was to come up with a definition of judgment. And I invented my own. The definition that I came up with was to state a moral opinion as though it were a fact. So this isn't. This even goes below my opinion is better than your opinion. The whole idea is that it's opinion. We don't even seem to recognize it. So if I say something, we're going to get away from action. I'll start with like nouns. So spiders. I used to be afraid of spiders. I'm going to use them as an example. If I say spiders are scary, I seem to be saying something about spiders. And if I meet someone who's not afraid of spiders, and I say spiders are scary, and to the person I'm talking to, that just sounds wrong. So they say, well, no, they're not scary. And now we feel like we're having an argument about spiders. If I wanted to be polite, I would say, I think spiders are scary. So I put a little prefix on there, but it still means I'm talking about spiders. I could be wrong, but I really don't think I am. That's why I said this. I think spiders are scary. We still think that we're being polite now, but we still think we're having an argument, a polite disagreement about spiders. But it's the scariness of the spiders is not in there, but it's the way our language works. We say spiders are arachnids, we say spiders are carnivores, we say spiders are scary. So we think that those are kind of equivalent. And I know we learned this in grade school, but I hear a lot of confusion about this. I really hear people thinking that that's something that's true about them. So the way that I found that I could turn this around was to say, I'm afraid of spiders. So then it's about me and my feelings, because that's where the scariness is. It's inside me, not in the spiders. So I hear a lot of confusion about this. My mother-in-law is convinced that snakes are horrible and should all die. And when I asked her, why do you think that? The first thing I said was, well, I think they're kind of neat. And she gave me a look like. So she felt that I was wrong about snakes. And then I have another friend who thinks that New York State wine is all disgusting and should be poured down the drain. And I said, why? I kind of like it. And he told me I was wrong. So I like the taste of it. Well, no, you're wrong. So I don't even know how that works, but there's confusion out there about this. So I asked my mother-in-law, why are you so sure that snakes are horrible? And this was a direct quotation. She said, So she felt that because she felt so strongly about it, that turned her opinion into a fact. Do you know people who've done that? I asked my friend with the wine, why are you so certain that New York State wine tastes bad? And I explained to him the whole concept. Wine is just alcohol or grapes and yeast in a bottle. The taste is not there. The taste is here and there and there and there and there. That's where the taste exists. And he said, well, experts say. So he thought that an expert opinion converted an opinion into a fact. Other things that people think convert an opinion into a fact would be a group consensus. So most of the people in the world believe that eating animals is perfectly fine. Does that make that opinion? That's an opinion. Does that make it a fact? It isn't. It's an action. It doesn't have the morality, the rightness, or wrongness built into it. It's something that we decide, each individual person. So if I say eating animals is wrong, I'm making a statement about that for everybody, as if there's one thing to decide there. So this is me stating a moral opinion as though it were a fact. And it's because of that language that we use. I can say, my mother-in-law could say, I'm terrified of snakes. My friend could say, I don't like New York State wine, and neither does my fancy friend who gets paid to have an opinion. But that's really what's going on. So we've been talking about, the nouns, the spiders, and I've also started talking about the actions. Some other things that people think transform. Another thing, I guess I got one more. The people that think that actions can be more moral if there's a law about them. So things that are legal are moral and things that are illegal are not. Well, we all know of terrible laws and laws in the past and all that. So I think most adults kind of know that that's not a thing. But I run into that with kids sometimes. Kids think that something is okay because it's legal. So now I had a better understanding of what the problem was with judgment. We're stating our opinion as though it's a fact. That's not true, and it's not respectful to other people when we do that. That's obviously a problem. So what are the alternatives? Some of the alternatives people come up with are to say, well, it's just your opinion. Okay, so if you want to knock people down in the street, and it's your opinion that that's moral, then off you go. Well, that's not helpful, because there's suffering in the world, and we'd like to address it. It doesn't allow us to do that. So the next thing that people usually fall back on is silence. They feel that I can't speak up, I don't know what to do. I don't want to tell people what they're doing is fine, but on the other hand, I don't want to tell people what they're doing is not fine. So what do I do? And I did think of one other way that people react instead of judging, and that's by punishing. It's another thing that people can do. We don't have very many opportunities, most of us. We don't have power over people to punish all that many people in our lives, but we do. They do see it sometimes, parents and teachers and so forth. Then they believe that something's right and something's wrong. They'll try to punish it out. That's another thing. So I don't like any of those solutions, so I came up with another one. I didn't invent this. I just realized it. And that would be, I've lost the word. Discernment. So it's discernment. So discernment, instead of deciding whether something is right or wrong, we decide whether it's useful or not. And useful requires a context. What are we trying to do? So we have to figure out where we want to go before we know whether something's useful or not. In morality, that's not really a context of that. It's just right or wrong. That's how we think about it. And I also want to, before I go too far into discernment, I do want to reiterate that we can take any of those judgment statements and turn them into something that's not judgmental by saying them about what we want for ourselves, not what we believe about the action, but what we want to do for ourselves. So that's kind of what we're going to do in discernment as well. We're going to just talk about what works for us. That doesn't mean we can't talk about what might work for other people, and that's where the power of it comes in. So I would use a discernment process when I'm talking to someone. It could be myself, but a lot of times it's someone else who's doing something that I don't like because I feel that they're harming someone. I see harm, and I want to address that in some way. It could be someone's eating animals. It could be someone's littering. It could be anything, and that's why I've made this talk so broad, because it can be more powerful than just talking about animals. And now is where I'm going to be using this a little bit more, because discernment uses these. Judgment is not. I came up with a process. Again, I'm not claiming to have invented. Probably other people have thought of this as well, but I'm going to talk about a process, and I see it as a 5-part process for discernment. And I'm going to go over really quickly what the 5 parts are, then I'm going to give you an example, I'm going to go over it in depth, and then give you 1 or 2 more examples depending on the time. The first part, having this process helps me jump right in when I'm talking to somebody, helps me jump right in and I know right where to start with my process. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to identify the value that I think is being undermined by what they're doing. Their value, not mine. I'm not a part of this. I'm just helping them figure out what's going to work for them. So that's the first part. And then there's a 3-part sentence where we say, we just repeat what we learned there, because we're talking to them and finding out what they believe. If this is what you want, if this is who you want to be, are you sure that what you're doing is going to get you there? So we're just looking at what you're doing and what you believe and what you're doing, and asking, do these go together? And then the 5th part is alternatives. So I'm going to give an example. I tutor volunteer basis in city schools, and it's an elementary school. And last year I had a 6th grader. He was, did this just go out?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did the light go out?
Yeah.
Maybe you accidentally turned it on.
It's back on though.
I think it's on now.
It's on.
Okay, so, okay. Can you still hear?
How about you? Let's see. Jiggling the wire, maybe. Does the light go out when it doesn't work?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's give it one more try, and then I'll just
There
talk
it
loud. So,
It could be the batteries. Go ahead.
yep. So this student, he's a really, really good student. I don't usually get really, really good students. I usually get the kids who are struggling the hardest. So he's a really, really good student, and very smart, kind, and respectful, hard worker. But he was coming to me because he didn't have any friends in school, and he had a terrible temper. So he didn't know how to talk to kids and people. He would silence, and then explode. So we were working. The teacher thought that we would work well together, and he volunteered to me one time that his brother would pester him while he was doing his homework, and then he would yell at his brother. That's basically all he said to me. And I thought to myself, okay, I can respond with judgment. That would be you're wrong, you're bad, you should. Those are judgment. I think judgmental words can fall into that pattern. It looks like lots of different things, but it's how it is. And I said, well, yeah, obviously I wasn't going to do that. So I said, okay, this is a job for discernment. So I tried to identify what's the value that I think that he would like to.
One more time?
Sure.
I think it's better.
We can hear you quite well.
Do you want me to?
You're right, Chris.
Okay.
Better.
Perfect.
Okay, so I had to identify the value. So the value that I had identified was he would probably like to have a good relationship with his brother. And I felt that he would probably agree that this wasn't the way to do that. So I asked him, do you like your brother? And he said, yeah. And I said, what do you like about him? We talked about that for a little while. And then we talked about, is it nice to have a good relationship with your brother? And I talked about my relationship with my brother, my kids' relationships together. And they've been best friends ever since the youngest was born, how wonderful that was. And he agreed. He said, yeah, I'd really like to have a better relationship with my brother. So I went into my sentence. I said, well, if you'd like to have a better relationship with your brother, you're going to have to think about whether you want to yell at him when you need something. And he said, yeah. And I said, did it work? He said, no. His brother still bothered him. I said, okay, let's think of some alternatives. And the alternative that we came up with, just because I'm going to refer back to this, was that he could talk to his brother and say, you know, if you are bothering me, I can't get my homework done, and then I won't be able to play with you later. But if you let me get my homework done now, we can play later. Fairly obvious alternative for an adult to come up with. So that is an example of me putting that into play. was an easy one because he was already on board. I didn't have to argue with him. He already knew that he wanted to change. So why didn't I just jump into the alternative? Why didn't I just jump to the solution for him? I wanted to remind him of what was important to him. I wanted him to remember when he was putting this into play, why he was doing it. Not just, well, Mrs. Colbert said that this would make my brother go away, but I wanted to really feel this is how I can have a good relationship with my brother. So that's an example, and I want to talk now about going into depth into these, so that it can be something that can work for you. The first one is identifying the value. When I first thought to do this, I thought, I'm just going to tell them to do it, just figure it out for yourselves. And I realized that I've been working on getting better at understanding people and being able to help people for many years, about 6-7 years. I've been really paying attention, learning everything I could about this. And it's really helped me. A lot of the insights that I've gotten have really helped me a lot. And is there a way that I could distill this to people? Because you all have your own experiences, but then and I'm sure I could learn a lot from you. But I realized that I had 2 insights that I could offer to you that had been given to me that I found really, really helpful in getting underneath what people are saying is the problem and finding out what's really going on. And so these are hypotheses for you. I think you might find them surprising. You may say, nah, you can take them home and try them out. You can reject them if you don't like them. The first one was given to me by a Buddhist teacher, Jack Kornfeld, and he said, underneath all negative emotions and anger is fear. I use that, since I heard that 5 years ago, I said, I'm not so sure. I've been using that, I find it so useful. I don't think it's failed me yet. Every time I see somebody who's angry, I look for the fear. And I'm able to get underneath that, I'm able to understand them better, and I'm able to have more compassion for them, and help them understand where this is coming from. So this list that I passed around, this can help you identify what somebody might be afraid of. This is from nonviolent communication, and that's a different thing, but I'm using this for my own uses here. So the first line up here says, these are some things that people would like to receive, and they can become frustrated when they don't. So when somebody's angry, you might be able to look at a list like this, obviously not in the moment, but when you get home, like, why was he so angry? See if you can identify on here the thing that this person wasn't getting that they would have liked to get. That can be really illuminating in talking with the person. So I thought we could try to figure out why the boy, let's call him John, the boy in my example, why was he yelling at his brother? We'd do some audience participation. We'll try to get down below just, he wanted his brother to leave him alone. So who has some ideas about why John was yelling at his brother? And it can be something that you just think for yourself. You don't have to pick it off this list. I can translate it onto this list for you. But do you have an idea?
Frustration?
Yeah.
He was frustrated. So that's kind of another, it's a flavor of anger. So what do you think he was frustrated about?
It could have been something at school, something he was frustrated about.
So, okay, his brother was pestering him. So, did you say something?
Disruption. Well, it was a disruption.
Right, so he was being interrupted. I don't like being interrupted.
So going back to like the fear could have been just he's afraid of not getting his homework assignment done.
Sure, yeah. So fear of not getting homework done. So what would happen if he got to school and he didn't have his homework done, you think? Embarrassed, yep. What is embarrassed? And you may not know the answer to this. Does anybody know how embarrassed would be on here, or go just a little bit deeper than embarrassed?
Well, security.
Security, like the self-security. You don't feel secure when...
Well, if you don't do your homework, you're going to get an F, and then you get a job, and you'll die of starvation.
Yep, so that's one. What's that?
Validation?
Validation, that's good. I hadn't thought of that. The one that I always go to, and this I actually wrote this in, to be seen for who we are. I told you he was a good student and a very hard worker. What's he going to do when he gets to school and his teacher says, you didn't do your homework? And his teacher's probably understanding, and she's going to know something's going on at home. But what if his brother keeps bothering him over and over again, and he's not getting his homework done? His teacher could think that he was stupid and lazy, that would not be seeing him for who he is. This is a big one. I wrote this in here because this is an important, you can almost always find this. People, it really bothers people to not be seen for who they are. Another one on here is to be heard. So his brother was not hearing him. And what happens there is that when someone doesn't hear us, then none of the rest of these get met either. And that's what was happening. His brother wasn't hearing him, therefore none of the other needs he had to get his homework done were happening. This is things, and I could say, you don't know, but when you go to this school and you don't get your homework done, you do it during recess. So he would have missed out on joy. He would have missed out on peace because his teacher might have been yelling at him. His parents might yell at him when he brought home a bad grade. All kinds of things. Does anyone have any other things that they want to say about why he might have been angry? Okay.
Could be a role thing, because would he shout at a friend like that? Would he be angry with a friend like that?
He certainly had that problem. He had anger issues. So,
Being the older brother?
yeah, he would yell at it. Apparently he would yell at anybody. It never happened to me because he was always calm with me. I never saw that happen. I actually have a difficult, I thought he was lovely. He was my favorite student I ever had. What's that?
Did you discuss with him what he thought his brother might be feeling and why he's pestering him?
We actually did. That was a little bit of part of our conversation. Yeah, that's a good point, is to find out what's going on with his brother. Yeah, so I didn't tell you this as part of the example, but before I started asking him about, would you like to have a better relationship with his brother? One of the first things I said was, that sounds terrible. That sounds really awful. I bet maybe you were worried about. And I went into a lot of these things. I remembered these, and I said you were afraid your teacher wouldn't see you for the hardworking, smart, student that you are, and so forth. And then I went from there on into the rest of it. So naming these things for someone who's angry, who's doing something that you don't like, naming why they're doing these things can be really, really powerful for people. I know probably anyone in here would like to have that kind of understanding when you're angry, to have somebody come and say, not just stop being angry, but I can see why I can guess why you're so frustrated. We're guessing, we don't want to tell people. So that can be a really powerful way to reach people who are, doing something out of fear. And they may not even realize it themselves. And to have that named is very, very useful. So that's been an insight that has helped me a lot, and it could help you when you want to use the discernment. Now, there are some things on here that are not all equal. So there's the need to be seen for who we are, and there's also air. If I don't get air, I'm going to suffer and die within a very, very short time. But if I'm not seen for who I am, I'm not going to die, and not just of that. The thing I want to point out here is I don't necessarily have to suffer. That's why I kind of hedged it. I used some wishy-washy language up there. We have the choice here. We don't have to have these things. We don't have to be heard. We don't have to be seen for who we are. We can recognize, if somebody's not seeing us for who we are, we can say, well, you know what, I did my best to express myself. That's their stuff if they still can't get it. So we can let go of that. And so I'm going to come back to that, but I think if we can recognize that as we're seeing these are things that we'd like to have, we can also recognize that there's a little bit of neediness in there that we can potentially let go. That's not to say to dismiss it or ridicule it, you're being needy, but to recognize that there's a potential of being liberated from those. So the second insight that I wanted to offer you is another insight from a Zen priest, Gil Fronsdale. And he said that we do not have a need to be loved. This is a Zen priest. He said we have a need to love. And this one has been a little harder for me to bring in. It hasn't been quite so obvious as the other one. But I want to point out that this list can be used two ways. It can be used as a list of things that we would like to have, and also a list of things that we would like to give. We would like to see other people for who they are. We would like to hear other people. We would like to love other people. We'd like to give them peace, and so forth. And so what he's arguing is that form, the outgoing form, is more powerful, and that the incoming form is a little bit optional. And so just take that home and think about it a little bit. And what you might like to do, I find a difference. I did this little exercise. I actually said out loud and meant, I put meaning behind it. I would like security. I would like warmth. Just pick some things on here. I would like. And feel what that feels like. Really pay attention to that, and then turn it around and say, I would like to offer others warmth. I would like to see others for who they are. And feel if there's a little difference. I feel a tremendous difference sometimes, depending on how I'm feeling. I feel a huge warmth, a glow that can warm me from the inside. I don't necessarily need other people to validate me and offer that back to me. I can warm myself up as I'm offering love to others. So, when I was talking to John, and I did not tell him, if you aren't nice to your brother, he won't love you. Because I didn't want to activate his fear. I wanted to activate the outgoing love and tell him about, have him be thinking about how can I show my love for my brother, and have that be the guidance there. That might have been all I wanted to say about that. If I think of anything more, I will come back to that. So I'm hoping that those two things can help you find out what value is you think is being broken. So what's going on here is that you've got the fear that's driving the behavior that you don't like, and it's obliterating the love that they would like to give. And helping identify that, helping remind them that they are loving people, because according to Gil Fronsdale, we all have that. We all want to love other people. I think we lose sight of that sometimes. You get somebody who's like, I don't know, a white supremacist or something, and you think, they can't love anyone. They don't have that in them. What if we were to be able to identify that in them and remind them of who they really are? That can be very powerful. It can be a powerful way of helping somebody see that what they're doing is not matching who they really are. So, okay, so I think we've identified, that can help you identify the value. Then you've got the three-part sentence. The first part is how am I doing for time? I'm not terrible, am I? I'm all right? Maybe another 10, 15 minutes. Okay. So the first part of the sentence is easy. You're just restating what you just said. If this is what you believe in, this is who you want to be, are you sure that? Now this is important. It's really important that we be genuinely interested in what they have to say and really be welcoming them into this conversation. It can't be snotty or us pushing our ideas. Because we're not saying, well, this is who you say you are and this is what you're doing. They don't go together. That's not going to work. That's already judgmental. We're already deciding our opinion, making our opinion into a fact. So that has to be really genuine, and between the end of our finger and the other person, there's no room for anything but either an argument, or I suppose they could say, oh, you're right, I should have known. I can see the error of my ways now. We love that to happen, but that's unlikely to happen. What we want to do really is leave a space to create a space with our words, with our genuine openness. The only way to come across as genuinely open is to be genuinely open, otherwise people see through that. Leaving a space for people to really come into this conversation, and that can leave us vulnerable because maybe they're right. Maybe they do have a good reason why these go together. So that has to be genuine, and then the facts, where we're listing what they're doing, this has to be just the facts. We can't dump our judgment into here. We can't just cram it all in there and then claim we're being discerning. So no exaggeration, no snottiness, no just judgmentalism in there, no loaded words that already kind of have some anger in them. And that can be hard. If we see somebody doing something that we don't like, and I don't really mean in the moment, you're not seeing somebody knocking somebody down in this moment, but we know that somebody's doing something we don't like, we can have some strong feelings about it, and to be able to hold that out of our language sometimes takes some practice. So when I was talking to John, I didn't say, if you want to have a good relationship with your brother, I'm not sure why you'd want to scream your head off at him and kick him out of your room like a big jerk. I didn't say that because that would have been exaggerating to him and judgmental and so forth. So I said it just the way I did. I really repeated back his own words to him. I'm not sure why you want to yell at your brother. So I'm going to go over the vegan argument next, and now I'll cover how I would say that, how I would describe what eating animals is. Just the facts, right? not loading anything else on. And then what I have to say about the alternatives, I was going to just say, find some alternatives. You're intelligent people, you can figure this out. But I do have two things that I've kind of already talked about that can fit in there. And one of them is discernment can actually fit in there. And that's the reason why I told you what I told John that he might like to try, is because what I told him was discernment. I said, I gave him a discernment to give to his brother. I said that he could tell his brother, this isn't working for you, bugging me, because it's not going to get you what you want. That's discernment. So it's already in there. The other thing that could fit in there is letting go of fear, and we already talked about that. So one of the possibilities for somebody's being driven by fear is to let go of that fear. So that's all of that. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is a vegan argument, and I didn't invent this. We need to identify the value that we think might be being undermined by what people are doing when they're not following a vegan diet. Gary Francione gave a phrase that I find useful, and that is, do you believe it's wrong to harm animals for no good reason? And so he finds that useful. He says if he asks 100 people that, 98 people will say yes, at least. So, and he can then take that on and show that that's not compatible with non-veganism. From what I said before, you might find that do you believe is kind of a flag that a judgment is about to follow, but we're just going to be polite about it. So if we take that off, and it's just him asking people, is it wrong to harm animals for no good reason? So he's asking them to decide if this is wrong for everybody. And I find that problematic, so I'd like to turn that around and say, would you like to avoid harming animals for no good reason? Now we're just talking about one person. You don't have to decide for everybody. So would you like to harm animals, or would you like to avoid harming animals for no good reason? If you'd like to avoid harming animals for no good reason, I'm not quite clear on why you would want to eat them, would be the simple way to put it, but I could also say why you want to participate in the abuse and killing of these innocent creatures, these innocent beings. So I can defend all of those. They're all logical facts. I don't know that I'm not sure I'm going to go into why I can defend that. Does anybody think that any of those words is maybe not a fact? I've loaded too much onto it, I've overloaded it.
I think the word innocent maybe a little bit. I know that because we're very compassionate people as vegans.
Right.
I just know that sometimes non-vegans aren't as compassionate or like shut off to that compassion.
Right.
And this idea of innocent creatures is like, well, what if they're not innocent? What if they just bit somebody or something? You know, like.
But that's not who we're eating.
No, I understand that.
Right.
But I'm just speaking from.
When I said that we don't want to use loaded language,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean we don't want to use emotional language.
Oh, okay.
We can use language, because sometimes when somebody sees the plain facts of what they're doing, they may not feel very good about it. You have to decide for yourself in the context which language you want to use. And that might be something you don't want to use, but if we just say eating animals, some people already have a bias against animals, and so if we want to get under that and get past that, because their immediate thought might be, well, that's what they're for.
Right.
So if we say these innocent beings, maybe that's a little different. And when the abuse that I'm talking about is not some employee who's getting mad and kicking animals, I'm talking about the systemic abuse. So when people are paying their dollars for this, they are paying somebody to do that. It's not just something that happens that the employees do on their spare time. This is the actual systemic abuse that's legal and that the businesses do, all of which is outlined in our flyers back there. So that's it. And then the alternatives, obviously, are veganism, talking about veganism and so forth. So it took me a long time to get around to veganism, but you can see how this process can be used for that.
So I want to thank Bunny and Tina. This is wonderful. If you want to talk one-on-one, I'm sure that Tina's going to stay a little bit while we